is based upon the case Lucy Santo Domingo versus State of Indiana, which includes an incredibly timely 14th Amendment issue focused on affirmative action in college admissions policies, and whether the consideration of race in those policies is permissible under the 14th Amendment. You will see debates by 6 students across our sophomore to senior classes who rank the highest in debate competitions over the course of the year. So they'll be the top 2 in each grade. There'll be 3 rounds, and in each 2 students will debate. One will represent the petitioner. The petitioner's organization called Students for Race Neutral Admissions, and another, the respondent, representing the petitioner's city college, Thurgood Marshall College. Each student will have 5 minutes to present an argument, starting with the petitioner. Once both students have presented, the judges will be given 10 minutes to question the students joining them. Questions can be asked directly to either student, and the opponent may request to respond to the other student's answer. Judges have complete discretion to allow the time limits. During the debates, we want to make sure that our students are not distracted. So to our audience, comprised of supporters, parents, friends, mentors, debate coaches, family, and our freshmen, please remember that this is a court of law. No talking or cheering on students as they debate. You'll have an opportunity to do so at the end. Please take this time to silence your devices and avoid rustling through papers and entering and leaving the room while the debate is in progress. We want to give our full attention and support to the debaters who worked so hard. I want to take this opportunity to thank our sponsor, Bloomberg. Not only have they been a valuable and consistent supporter of our students over many years, but their sponsorship dollars help us provide scholarships to tonight's winners. Volunteer attorneys from Bloomberg's legal department are graciously serving as tonight's judges. We appreciate your commitment to supporting our students. Following opening remarks, I will ask the competitors to step outside, and you'll be called in pairs. When all of the debates are done in this room, all students and guests will have a 5-minute recess while the winners finalize their scores. If possible, we ask that you remain in the room during the recess so you don't miss anything, and to get out of here on time. Once the scores are finalized, we will announce the awards. So without further ado, let's get to our debates. Competitors, please exit the room. And judges, please confirm that you have 6 scoring sheets, a working pen, and any other materials that you might need. Yeah.
Count down here. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Our timekeeper, Gabriella Ronquillo, will hold up the number of minutes remaining in each section. Judges, are we ready?
Ready.
Okay. You call in the first case, please. We will now hear the case of Students for Race Neutral Admissions versus Thurgood Marshall College. Representing the petitioner is Alexa Maya, and representing the respondent is Maya Taylor.
Chu. Miss Chu is an Asian American student with an impressive track record, but she was rejected from Urban Marshall College, despite other students with comparable or even lesser grades getting accepted, and she fears it was because of her race. Because of this, we are here to discuss whether the consideration of race in the college's admissions process is constitutional and whether Grutter v. Gulliver should be overturned. As a representative of the petitioner, I am asking the court to overturn Grutter and to stop this unfair and unjust policy. In matters of intentional racial discrimination by public entities such as TMC, strict scrutiny is applied, meaning that there must be a compelling interest and a policy that is narrowly tailored to meet this interest. While I do defer that the college has a compelling interest, I will show that even under Grutter, the policy that they use is not narrowly tailored. And, however, I'm also arguing in the alternative that Grutter must be overturned. TMC's policy is not narrowly tailored for two reasons. The first is that their point system looks like the unconstitutional point system in France. Personal background is worth 13 points out of a point system of 100. And students can be awarded points based off of their race. The full 13 points usually goes to students largely from underrepresented minorities. And while other factors may play into personal background, the act of awarding points based off race makes this process mechanical. Just because the point system doesn't have a cutoff score doesn't make this process any less mechanical or mathematical, which is unconstitutional. The respondent will argue that this point system is merely a shortcut and this process is narrowly tailored because it has a second individualized review. To that, I raise this question. Why is there a point system in the first place? Why are points being awarded based off race? The second review is a sham. It's only put in place after points are already awarded. An individualized review doesn't cure an unconstitutional point system. The second reason they are not narrowly tailored is the existence of race-neutral alternatives. Under Fisher, if there's a race-neutral alternative, then the process is not narrowly tailored. And the college has not shown a good faith effort in proving that these alternatives aren't enough. They already have two race-neutral alternatives, being the top 10% auto-admit policy and increased recruitment in urban and low-income areas. These are workable alternatives. But the college hasn't met its burden in showing that these policies aren't enough to increase diversity. All their expert has said is that when used in tandem with policies that consider race, that these policies increase diversity. But that's not enough. The college must show that racial consideration is necessary to increase diversity and that standing by themselves, these policies aren't sufficient. I am also arguing that Grutter should be overturned. The court relies on previous rulings to influence their decisions. However, circumstances have changed. Originally, 25 years was decided that it would be enough for affirmative action to be needed. At 20 years, we can already see that it's not necessary. There has been improvement, but this is still discrimination. Are we going to allow state-sanctioned discrimination against another minority, no less, to continue forever? At the time, Grutter made sense, but it has no place in today's society. Also, Grutter was wrongly decided for both policy and legal reasons. Originally, in the case, there was an imposed quota system. The racial makeup of the applicant pool was incredibly close to the racial makeup of the accepted class. There was a 0.5% difference. 0.5. This is intentional, deliberate racial balancing. This isn't just discrimination. It's discrimination without passing strict scrutiny. Also, the Constitution, for better or for worse, is colorblind. And there are many reasons for this. The government cannot be discriminating regardless of whether they think they have another cause. The government cannot be making decisions of good versus bad discrimination. Also, there is clear harm being done to Asian American students. Historically, Asian Americans have also faced harms, and under affirmative action, these harms should be remedied. But instead, they're being harmed. We're not remedying these historic harms. We are, in fact, just extending them. And the government has decided that it's completely okay to discriminate against this minority. There should be a blanket rule saying that the government cannot discriminate at all. There should be no distinction between good versus bad discrimination. In conclusion, Your Honor, may I please conclude my argument?
You may.
Thank you. In conclusion, I ask the court to rule in favor of the students overlooked by this policy, the students harmed by this unfair and unjust policy, and to rule in favor of the petitioner that Grutter should be overturned and that the racial consideration of the college admissions process is unconstitutional. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lyon. Counsel? And Ms. Tello, you can have an additional 20 seconds at the end of your argument should be needed.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
May I start?
Please do.
May it please the court. My name is Maya Tello, and I'm the respondent who's representing Thurgood Marshall College. Today I'm asking the court to uphold Grutter as a good president by affirming the lower court's decision that the use of race in admissions is permissible under the 14th Amendment. The use of race in admissions has been deemed by this court constitutional for decades. Adopting the race-blind standard the petitioner desires runs afoul of stare decisis and will be detrimental to the growth of students as a person and deny them the educational benefits that arise from immersing themselves in a diverse educational space. When race is involved, strict scrutiny applies. Strict scrutiny is comprised of 2 prongs. To the first prong of the test, there must be a compelling government interest. To the second prong, for a law to be narrowly tailored, it must be written precisely to place as few restrictions as possible. I will address each prong separately. To the first prong of the test, there must be a compelling government interest. Consistent with Grutter, Gratz v. Bullinger, and Fisher v. State of Texas Austin, the court has found that there is compelling government interest in universities being able to achieve diversity through race-conscious admissions. Further, there are several policy reasons for not overturning this court's prior ruling that there is compelling government interest in race-conscious admissions. As a law school, the need for diversity is especially important because the school will be creating future leaders of tomorrow who will engage in politics and as such need to be exposed to the unique perspectives that a diverse setting brings. Stereotypes in a legal system can be broken down, critical thinking skills improved, and aid in increase the representation of minority lawyers and politicians who will then represent underrepresented communities. Consistent with this court's determination, TMC is striving to yield a diverse class that will benefit students' quality of education. To the second prong of the test, for a law to be narrowly tailored, it must be written precisely to place as few restrictions as possible. Consistent with Fisher v. State of Texas Austin, TMC's interest in increasing diversity is being pursued in a way that does not discriminate against students of other races. TMC, going back to TMC's submission process, they use 8 main categories. These categories include academic program, academic performance, standardizing testing, athletic or artistic or other special talents, personal background, and personal attributes. To highlight thus making it a holistic enterprise. To clearly highlight a biased admission process, I will refer back to Gratz v. Bullinger, where the University of Michigan had a 20-point system. The petitioner brought up that TMC has a 13-point system, but the difference between these 2 cases is that in the University of Michigan, these points were awarded solely on race, and it was found that the majority of students who were being admitted to the school were those who received the points because of the huge disparity in cost. However, in TMC, not only is the personal background like a mini holistic enterprise because it awards the points to not just race, but also socioeconomic status and whether the student is a first-generation student, thus allowing students from all races to be able to receive these points. Furthermore, it was found that even with these points, applicants were being accepted and denied at equal rates. There was no discriminatory advantage given to students from any particular race, thus making it a holistic enterprise and narrowly tailored because there is no discrimination taking place. And furthermore, as I mentioned, this is the personal background one among 7 other categories that has nothing to do with race. Because this is a holistic enterprise, with race being one among many factors, and it is worth repeating that race is one among many factors, it is not determinative. It is narrowly tailored, and is consistent with the guidelines of the Equal Protection Clause, and it is narrowly tailored. Employing race-conscious admissions is important to promote equity in higher education. Having a diverse student body benefits all students because it brings in new perspectives and allows students to learn from each other and to grow from each other. Further, in fact, the Century Foundation found that students' racial biases decrease. It improves intellectual self-confidence and it enhances leadership skills. Thus, it is the highlight of having a diverse campus is important and will benefit, especially in settings such as TMC. It will benefit students' quality of education, and has been no evidence found that there is discriminatory foul play happening. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Please continue.
I therefore ask for the court to uphold Grutter as a good president and affirm the lower court's decision that the use of race in admissions is permissible under the 14th Amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Maya, why don't you both come up? Suspect we're going to have questions for both of you. Ms. Maya, you argue that strict scrutiny should apply. Obviously, strict scrutiny is the standard if there is a discriminatory policy based explicitly on race. Here, as I understand the school's admissions approach, race is one factor among many. Why then should we apply strict scrutiny?
Well, I would say that we should apply strict scrutiny because this is a matter of intentional racial discrimination. And regardless of if race is just one amongst many, it's the idea that points are being awarded based on race. It's not a completely holistic review. This is a mechanical, mathematical process. Just because there is a second review doesn't make the first point system any more constitutional. Also, strict scrutiny is historically applied to cases of racial discrimination. And since this is a case of racial discrimination, strict scrutiny should apply as per the history.
So you agree that strict scrutiny applies here?
Yes, Your Honor. I do agree that strict scrutiny applies because as my counsel, as the opposing counsel said, race is involved. However, is it okay if I may reply to the petitioner's argument?
Please.
The 20-point system was ruled unconstitutional in Rasmussen Volker. It was ruled unconstitutional because the majority of students who received points were being admitted to the school at an overwhelming amount, and this is unfair. However, with TMC, it was found that these 13 points, the difference that these 13 points are not just awarded solely on base, but also socioeconomic status and whether the students are first-generation student, thus making it accessible to all types of students and not prioritizing students from a specific race. And it was found that at the end of the day, whether students are admitted and denied were solely dependent on the individualized, holistic review that TMC had.
But if the record showed that, in fact, students from a particular racial group were automatically receiving points or preference, then that would be a different outcome.
It would, Your Honor, but the evidence and the facts in this case is that that is not the case.
Thank you.
I have a question for the petitioner. So you said in your argument that the use of a point system is unconstitutional. In this instance, it appears, based on the facts, that the point system, when it's considering race, is rarely determinative of an admission outcome. So with that set of facts, how do you come to the conclusion that the consideration of race in a point system is unconstitutional?
Well, it's not that the consideration of race, but it's the fact that it's being used in a point system. The court has said that in order for the use of race to be narrowly tailored, then it has to be a holistic, individualized approach, and it cannot be a mathematical or mechanical process. The act of awarding points makes this a mechanical process. You are appointing a value to someone's race. Just because there are other factors doesn't make this any less mechanical, because points are still being awarded based on race.
So then is the point system the sole basis for determining admission, or is it one of multiple factors in determining admission?
If it's one of multiple factors, it still makes the process unconstitutional because it shouldn't be there in the first place. As I said before, a second holistic individualized review does not cure an unconstitutional point system. If it's saying that the point system isn't determinative, then why is it there in the first place? Why is it needed? The sole existence of a point system makes this an unconstitutional admission process.
So then a question for the respondent. Do you think the university has considered race-neutral alternatives sufficiently as required by law?
Thank you for that point, Your Honor. TMC, in fact, has. They have tried reaching out to underserved communities, but it has proven not effective. They have tried the top 10 automatic middle policy. It has not gotten them there to their diversity goals. It was found that the top 10 automatic middle policy, combined with their individualized holistic review in 8 main categories, plus reaching out to underserved communities, all combined has been the most effective way of achieving their diversity goals.
Your Honor, may I respond to this point?
Yes.
In fact, all the expert that TMC has provided has said is that when used in tandem with race-conscious policies, these race-neutral policies are insufficient. However, the college has never shown that just using the top 10 auto-admit policy and the increased recruitment, which they are already using in their policy right now, that just those policies wouldn't be enough. In order for their burden of proof to be met, they need to show that just all these policies are enough, which they haven't done. All they've said is that when used with race-conscious admission, then these policies work.
Your Honor, may I respond?
I think yes, respond, but let's be quick.
Yes, of course, thank you. In both Rutter and Bishop, it was determined that the court can give universities the benefit of doubt that they have tried race-neutral alternatives. And TMC, as I previously mentioned, has with the top 10 automatic middle and reaching out to underserved communities. However, university is not required to exhaust every conceivable race-neutral alternative. And TMC has already tried race-neutral, and it has not given them the results that they have desired.
I have a question that I would like to ask the respondents. Hello. Are we really using race as a plus factor in considering qualification for admission when there is a point system in place? Why have the point system at all if it's not necessary?
Your Honor, there is no evidence that not using. Your Honor, there has been evidence found that this point system, combined with, once again, their individualized holistic review, and among the other 8 main categories, that 7 of those categories have nothing to do with race, have been proven to be the most effective way of increasing diversity. Furthermore, as I previously mentioned in Graz, the point system was unconstitutional because it gave students from certain races an unfair advantage. In TMC, that is not the case. In TMC, these points are not just scored solely on race, but also socioeconomic status and broader student and first generation student, because the TMC values diversity in all of its dimensions, thus making these points not giving any students unfair advantages, but makes it accessible to all types of students. And as I mentioned before, whether students receive these points or didn't, it all came down to their individualized holistic review that then determined whether the applicant was admitted or denied, thus showing there is no foul play happening and differentiating it between why the point system was ruled unconstitutional in Graz versus Wolford.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes, please.
Well, the respondent keeps on emphasizing the point that admissions is based off of an individualized second review. However, that still leads back to the question of why it's there in the first place. The court has said that admission processes using race cannot be mathematical or mechanical, and the point system is basically that. It's awarding a value to someone's race. And the respondent keeps saying that, oh yes, there's still an individualized review. But as I said before, the individualized review does not cure an unconstitutional point system. If it is not necessary, then why does the college continue to use it?
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
The point system is unconstitutional if it gives an unfair advantage. In TMC, that is not the case. Furthermore, it has also been proven that point system that is on personal background and has awards opposed to other categories has been it works towards TMC's most effective policy, thus explaining why it's necessary. Because that is a part of this huge holistic enterprise that TMC has going on, and take that factor out, their most effective way of approaching increasing diversity may not work anymore.
Council, for the respondent, I have a question. We seem to be affording, or would be affording, a tremendous amount of deference to the judgment of the university. Why should we afford that much deference? It's really the fox guarding the henhouse, isn't it?
Thank you for that point, Your Honor. College admission officers have years of expertise in the structuring of the admission process. They have the experience of multiple years of dealing with this, of having to create an admission process and of admitting thousands of students on a daily basis. Thus they have the expertise needed to employ this work, while the court does not necessarily have the hands-on expertise that these admissions officers have. Just as an admissions officer cannot make a decision based on this case because they do not have the expertise of a judge, a judge does not, or the court, matter of fact, does not have the specific expertise to go into the structure of the admission process and, the structure of the admission process and work with it to admit students or deny it.
Yes, please.
Just because the colleges have years of experience doesn't mean that we give so much deference to these colleges that we allow them to just completely bypass the Constitution. The Constitution is colorblind. For that reason, it is in place to protect our citizens from instances of harm being done. And although the court isn't an expert in education, the court is an expert in the Constitution. And they do know whether or not this policy is unconstitutional. We shouldn't be giving so much deference to the university because in the end, this is a public university. It is a city-affiliated university. And as a public entity, the Constitution still applies to them. So much deference cannot be given that the Constitution is just completely walked over.
Your Honor, may I respond to that?
I think we are out of time. And so with that, I will thank both counsel for their excellent arguments. We'll obviously reserve decision. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We will now hear the case, Students for Race-Neutral Admissions versus Thurgood Marshall College. Representing the petitioner is Mohammed Zaid. Representing the respondent is Eugenia Bosbanco.
Please.
May it please the court, Your Honors. My name is Mohammed Zaid from law firm Zaid Greer Vieira, and I represent the petitioners in this action. In this action, we ask that you reverse the circuit court's decision and find that the consideration of race in admissions is unconstitutional and violates Ms. Chu's 14th Amendment rights. Your Honors, Grutter was decided under the assumption that America's higher education will diversify as a result of its holding. According to the study conducted by the National Center for Educational Data Statistics, in 2002, 69.5% of all undergraduate students were white, followed by 12.4% black. In 2018, 55.2% were white and 13.4% were black. An increase of only 1% for black students is proof that race-conscious admissions do not work. However, when considering plans like that at UCLA and UC Berkeley, both schools successfully admitted the most racially diverse class in decades in 2018. only after banning race-conscious decisions. Therefore, Grutter must be overturned, for its original intention behind its decision has been proven to not work. Your Honors, for a law to be constitutional, it must pass both prongs of strict scrutiny. TMC claims it uses its various race-conscious decisions as a way of selecting a diverse incoming class of students that reflects the diverse perspectives in this city. According to the Gratz Court, diversity as a basis for employing racial preferences is simply too open-ended and indefinite to constitute a compelling government interest. Therefore, it fails the first prong of strict scrutiny and is thus unconstitutional. Additionally, Your Honor, TMC's policy fails the second prong of strict scrutiny. First, the top 10% is not a policy intended to advance the educational benefits that flow from a diverse student body. Instead, it's a policy that is redundant, due to it achieving the same objective that the alleged holistic review is supposed to. Therefore, it is not the least restrictive means, because it's repetitive in forming an admittable class with the holistic review that TMC claims its students receives. Next, Your Honors, the point system. TMC allocates up to 13 points for a student's personal background. Similarly, in Gratz, 20 out of 150 were dedicated to personal background, 13%. In TMC's case, 13 out of 100, also 13%. TMC was decided to be unconstitutional under the claim that it too closely resembled that of a quota system. Due to largely underprivileged, underrepresented racial minorities receiving the full 13 points, TMC mimics Gratz. Additionally, TMC's incoming freshman class statistics demonstrate a perfect example of how TMC's admission plan functions like that of a quota system. The percentage of admitted students from underrepresented racial identities fall within a 5 to 10% range of those who apply. Additionally, therefore, TMC cannot be decided constitutional while Gratz was decided to be unconstitutional. Therefore, Your Honors, we ask that Grutter must be overturned and TMC's policy fails both prongs of strict scrutiny. There is neither a compelling government interest nor is it now a failure. Thank you.
Thank you. Counsel?
Your Honors, may I proceed?
Please.
May it please the Court. My name is Eugenia Bonco from the law firm Bonco Barrett Chowdhury, and I represent the respondent, Thurgood Marshall College, in this action. Thurgood Marshall College is one of many colleges and universities across the U.S. that utilizes race in college admissions. Many universities use the racial consideration policies to help diversify their college campuses. Thurgood Marshall College is so committed to thoroughly evaluating its applicants that it uses an exhaustive list of 40 criteria to evaluate all of its applicants. One of that criteria includes the personal background category that assesses aspects of the applicant, such as the race of the applicant, whether the applicant is a first-generation college student, and the socioeconomic status of the applicant. Thurgood Marshall College, in addition to considering this criteria, also uses a holistic review process where they consider each and every applicant individually and thoroughly to make sure that they give each applicant an informed admissions decision. However, in light of all these aspects of Thurgood Marshall College's admissions program, the petitioner still argues that the racial consideration policies featured in this program violates the 14th Amendment. However, today I will argue and prove that the racial consideration policies do not violate the 14th Amendment because they serve a compelling governmental interest of diversity and they're narrowly tailored to achieving that governmental interest. First, the admissions program serves a compelling governmental interest of diversity. Previous court precedent in Bollinger, Fisher, and Gratz has accepted diversity as a compelling governmental interest. And in all of those cases, the courts in those cases have granted deference to the university when assessing the educational benefits that flow from diversity. We understand as respondents that this is not absolute. Granting deference to the university in their academic judgments is not absolute. In UT Austin versus Fisher, it states that before giving deference to the university must give a principled and reasoned argument for their academic decision. In Bollinger, the university stated that diversity helps to promote cross-racial understanding, helps to make classroom discussions and environments more lively, helps to make improve educational outcomes overall, and most importantly, prepare students for an increasingly diverse workforce and world. Your Honors, all of these arguments are clearly reasoned and principled, and thus using Bollinger is clearly a case that was decided correctly and thus should not be thrown out. And thus, diversity is a compelling governmental interest. Furthermore, the racial consideration policies used by Thurgood Marshall College is narrowly tailored to achieving that governmental interest. According to Rudder, in order for a policy to be considered narrowly tailored, the policy must not unduly burden or harm those of certain racial groups and cannot facilitate illegitimate racial prejudice or stereotyping. When looking at Thurgood Marshall College's policy, there's 100 points that all applicants can, that's the maximum that all applicants can receive. 13 points is the maximum that those applicants can receive for personal background. Your Honors, 13 is a fraction of 100 points, and the petitioner argues that this makes a significant difference in admissions decisions. However, that is simply not true. Even if an applicant was to receive the full 13 points for the personal background, that would not determine that they were the one they would get in or not get in. There is no cutoff within the admissions program for Thurgood Marshall College, and there's no set number that determines who gets in and who does not. This is a non-mechanical, holistic review process. Aside from the point system, we do also review each application individually. So as this admissions program shows all the highlights of the court decision that supports holistic review processes. Your Honors, it is extremely important that you rule in favor of the respondent. There has been so much work done to ensure educational equality across the races, and Your Honors, we ask that you affirm the ruling of the appellate court and rule in favor of the respondent. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for the petitioner.
Yes, Your Honor, sorry.
I think you can both step forward, because there'll be questions for both. So you said that that the university does not have a compelling interest in promoting diversity. Was that your conclusion?
Yes, Your Honor.
So there's no compelling interest in promoting diversity on the basis of race, on the basis of background of any sort. Is that your conclusion, that that's what the Constitution requires?
Not necessarily. So, sorry. While TMC claims that it uses its various race-conscious decisions as a way to reflect the diverse perspectives in the city, this is distinguishable from, for example, Fisher and, for example, Grutter, in which they discuss how the educational benefits that flow from diversity. Educational benefits that flow from diversity is distinguishable from diversity in and of itself. Gratz affirms this by stating that diversity as a basis for said race-conscious decisions is unconstitutional, whereas the desire or a compelling interest for the educational benefits, that is constitutional, and that compels the first prong of strict scrutiny. Does that answer your question, Aaron?
Yes, it does. So,
But if, I'm sorry.
no, please.
Let's assume, arguendo, that the school has identified a compelling interest for its policy. Would you agree that we ought to be deferential to best achieve that interest? Sure. Let's assume that the school's interest in achieving a certain degree of diversity among its student body is a compelling economic interest.
Right.
Would it not then be appropriate for this court to defer to the school as to how to best achieve that interest?
Excellent question, Your Honor. While certain aspects of the application process should be allowed to the discrepancy of the college, there are certain guidelines that should be in place. For example, in Gratz, it was decided to be unconstitutional due to there being a quota system, due to there being 20 out of 150 points being dedicated to personal background. Whereas in TMC's case, an applicant who, if there was 15% applicants who identify as Latino, the school allows for up to 25% of those to be accepted, because this functions like a quota system. For there to be a 5 to 10% range of those who applied and those who got in is simply an example of a quota system. Along with there being 13% of the max points being allocated simply for personal background, that's also another example of a quota system. These are all simply examples of mechanical applications of race that TMC uses. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Your Honor, may I respond to
Please.
that? There are set guidelines in court precedent to decide when to give deference to university. UT Austin versus Fisher is a prime example. They stated that you must give a reasoned and principled argument for your academic decision, and that is what the university has done in this case. When we are deciding when to give deference, it has nothing to do with quota systems, even though that is considered when considering the narrowly tailored. When we're deciding to give deference to the university on the compelling governmental interest prong, it mainly has to do with the reasoning that the university has given. And as we can see, using the UT Austin versus Fisher rule, the university has done that, and thus it is valid for us to give deference to the university.
How do you respond to the argument that these programs just aren't working? At what point does the court need to say, we need to step in and go back to fundamental equal protection jurisprudence, because these programs at these universities have been trying over the past many years just aren't producing the kinds of results that they say they're designed to achieve?
Well, Your Honor, we also have to think about the fact that systemic issues also are involved in this issue. It's not going to be easy to ever undo the wrongs of the past and ensure that it's diverse all the time, but we're making those steps. And if we try and undo those steps through outlawing affirmative action and racial consideration policies, we're doing damage to years and years of work done to make sure that we can have equality of equal access to education across the races. And things are working. There's been cases where there's been an increase in UT Austin versus Fisher. There was a slight increase to the diversity, but we're not really paying attention to numbers here. We're paying attention to that critical mass that we're looking for and making sure that students are represented in some ways, while not also making sure that we're being holistic and considering all aspects of the application and not just race.
Very briefly, I want to give other judges opportunities to ask questions.
All right. To address one of the points that were made by my accomplice? No.
I hope not.
You could say respondent.
Respondent, to my respondent. While there has been certain examples of race being increased, for example, the 12.4% in 2002 to be 13.4% in 2018, a 1% increase is proof that it does not work. Had there been a substantial increase from 2002 to 2018, it would be confirmation that race-conscious admissions do not work. However, this is proof that it does not. When looking at, for schools such as UCLA and UC Berkeley, both schools which banned race-conscious decisions, they were both able to successfully admit the most racially diverse class in decades. This coincides with other examples of universities in the US, for example, Harvard, in which there was an expert who presented a hypothetical case in which an Asian American who had a 25% chance of being accepted, when changed their race to white, was 36%. Latinx was 77%, and Black was 95%. For there to be hindrances to certain races simply because of who they are or who they were born with is simply proof that this cannot be upheld. unconstitutional.
Thank you. I have a question for the respondent. Shouldn't colleges be focusing on students that have the least economic resources?
Your Honor, that is true. That is definitely a program that should be in place, because we as respondents do concede that, diversity doesn't really exist in all forms at colleges. However, racial disparities can't be solved by programs that are aimed at targeting those who are economically disadvantaged. Those who have been systemically oppressed and haven't had access to certain resources due to their racial background, we should instead be focusing on that and increasing racial diversity, because economic diversity and racial diversity are very different, and they look very different on college campuses. And when we are looking for diversity, we're really also looking for how that's going to affect the environment on campus. And economic diversity isn't just going to cut it. So I do concede that that's something that we can focus on, but I think it's also needed that we do focus on racial diversity as well.
So as a follow-up, is your position that although there is systemic racism, economic diversity won't provide the same level of diversity across the university as racial diversity?
Your Honor, I wouldn't say that. I would say that economic diversity and racial diversity are very different, and both of them should be valued. But I feel that, but it is very important that we also focus on making sure that we can have programs like racial consideration policies that can increase racial diversity. Yes, Your Honor.
Do you want me to respond?
Yes.
However, there have been recent statistics that indicate to the contrary to what the respondent claimed. For example, white workers tend to earn around 1.6 times as much as black workers, compounded with the fact that 71% of undergraduate minorities at Harvard specifically come from houses above the national median. 71% of the undergraduate students on Harvard's campus come from families which earn more money, with the fact that white workers tend to earn 1.6 times as much, along with, students in the top income quartile at both UNC Chapel Hill and Harvard are 16 times as more numerous as those in the bottom fifth quartile. These are all proof that socioeconomic status is somewhat closely tied to the racial status. Therefore, using race-blind admissions processes is still going to create the critical mass and the diversity that schools would create the educational benefits that would flow from these diversity.
Your Honor, can I quickly respond?
Yes.
I'd like to emphasize that diversity, looking a certain way, is also very important. When we're creating diversity, we also want to create an environment where diverse perspectives are included, and diversity also has the way diversity feels for people is also very important. If we do have socioeconomic diversity, we also have to consider that when we're looking at systemic issues, those who have been of certain races and have been poor have also had access to certain opportunities that people who have been of certain minorities and certain races who are economically disadvantaged haven't had access to those opportunities. So while I think it's important that we consider increasing economic diversity, it's also very important that we increase racial diversity.
A question for Commissioner Scanner. Given all the various statistics, apologies, we reached time.
I'm sorry. Council, thank you very much for those arguments. We will reserve judgment.
Thank you so much.
We will now hear the case, Students for Race-Neutral Admissions versus Thurgood Marshall College. Representing the petitioner is Jessica Baba. Representing the respondent is Wendy Laird.
Police Court, my name is Jessica Baba from the firm Baba and Jansen. I represent the petitioners, College for Race Neutral Admissions, or SRNA, and Wendy Chu. We respectfully submit that the court should reverse the decision made at the appellate court because TMC's use of race in admissions is not narrowly tailored. Further, the court should overturn Grutter since Grutter violates the Equal Protection Clause, is no longer needed, and the court mistakenly decided that a quota system was not effective. First, I will argue that Grutter should be overturned, and second, I will argue that TMC's use of race in admissions is not narrowly tailored. Your Honors, race does not and should not warrant one group being favored above another, and no one should be discriminated against because of their race. Students across America are being robbed of a fair admissions process in the wake of race-conscious admissions. The court should see to it that no student faces the injustice that Wendy Chu has. First, Grutter should be overturned. The court decided Grutter without full consideration of the facts. Fisher versus the University of Texas at Austin found that a university cannot impose a fixed quota system or otherwise determine race or diversity per se to be a specified percentage of a particular group merely because of its race. In Grutter, a quota system is at play, similar to what we see with TMC at present. Chief Justice Rehnquist's dissent in Grutter further amplifies this argument with evidence. From 1995 to 2000, the amount of students from the applicant pool closely tracked the amount of students from diverse minority groups that were also found in the admitted class. So we can see that a quota system is at play. Furthermore, Grutter clearly established a timeline, 25 years, and the time is up for what has become an unnecessary precedent. Second, TMC's use of race in admissions is not narrowly tailored. Even if the government's interest here is achieving the 20 educational benefits of diversity on college campuses, policies must be narrowly tailored to achieve that end, which TMC has not done. In fact, TMC uses a point system. A total of 13 points are allotted to minority students, or students in general, they might say, for personal background. But we see that a majority of minority students receive these 13 points. An analogous case here would be Gratz v. Bollinger, in which it was found that the case was unconstitutional because a point system was at play. Similarly, a point system is being used here at TMC, in which 13 points are given to a majority of the minority students. Like the situation in Grutter, there is no coincidence behind the numbers seen here. Students across America, especially at TMC, are faced with situations in which they find they are going to schools with a quota system. In fact, the freshman class was faced with a 5 to 10% range, where minority students, were seen to reflect a 5 to 10% range of the overall applicant pool. So clearly, schools are implementing a quota system and setting aside seats for minority students in order to increase diversity. And going forward, colleges are more likely to blatantly express their interest in diversity and racial balancing. As Richard D. Killenberg explains, schools consistently have attempted to decrease the number of accepted Asian American applicants. On academic measures, Asian Americans do tend to outperform their peers. Yet, we see that admissions officers have routinely rated them lower than their other peers as well on subjective matters such as maturity, grit, empathy, leadership ability. And so we can see that these colleges are trying to lower the overall application scores of students. And TMC is also required to show that they considered race-neutral alternatives and that those alternatives were not effective in achieving diversity on campuses, which TMC cannot do here. TMC has a policy that allows students who graduate in the top 10% of the class to be automatically admitted. And they also can consider other alternatives that consider socioeconomic disadvantages, which will help increase diversity on campuses. To conclude, the court should reverse the decision made at the public court and see to it that TMC's race-conscious policy is found to be unconstitutional. Further, the court should overturn Grutter since Grutter's precedent was found without looking at the full consideration of the facts, and there was a quota system at play, as well as the fact that the 25 years are up and Grutter is no longer needed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Your Honors. May I please the court? My name is Wendy Lay of the law firm Cheney Davis, and I represent the respondents, Thurgood Marshall College. I am here today to respectfully request that you affirm Grutter v. Bollinger and the lower court decision. In doing so, the court will also find that the consideration of race in college admissions is constitutional under the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. We are here today on appeal from the Second Circuit who ruled in favor of TMC. The issue in this case is whether Thurgood Marshall College's race-conscious admissions process is constitutional under the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, and if Grutter should be overturned. The facts that are here today are that TMC is a highly selective university with a strong criminal justice program. TMC uses many factors and processes when looking at their applicants. Some of these include the top 10% policy, readers who are guided by more than 40 criteria, and individualized review. I'll first argue that TMC has compelling interest in using race in its admissions process. It is also nearly tailored because it considers race-neutral alternatives and is flexible, holistic, and individualized. Third, TMC has no quota system or determinative points. And finally, Grutter should be upheld as good precedent. TMC has compelling interest in using race in its admissions process. Under strict scrutiny, a race-conscious admissions process must have a compelling interest to be constitutional. Under Fisher, a university must give a reason and principled explanation for this interest. In this case, TMC has a compelling interest, and that is the 20 educational benefits of student body diversity. Some of these include cross-racial understanding, breaking down our racial stereotypes, and enabling students to better understand people of different races. Similar to Grutter, both the law school and TMC have the same interest in wanting more diverse student body. Secondly, TMC's race-conscious admissions process is nearly tailored. Under strict scrutiny, a race-conscious admissions process must be narrowly tailored to be constitutional. In this case, TMC has a race-neutral alternative, and that is the top 10% policy. It is also flexible because it considers all the qualifications that make up an applicant and places them on the same footing for consideration by using factors like Common App and academic performance. And by doing so, they do not unduly burden other applicants as established in Grutter. It is also holistic because there are admissions officers that look at all the qualifications that make them an applicant, and just like in Grutter, both the law school and TMC uses individualized review for all of their applicants. Third, per the ruling in Fisher, a university cannot use a quota system. It cannot isolate each category of an applicant with desired qualifications from competition with other applicants. In this case, TMC only uses race as a plus factor, and unlike the grants, TMC does not award 20 points to every single minority applicant. Additionally, in Grutter, it has been established that a university shall award no mechanical predetermined bonuses. In this case, TMC does use points, but it's only as a way to leave an impression of an applicant. For example, personal background is worth 13 out of 100 points that applicants can get, and while it does include race, it also includes many other factors, like socioeconomic status and if a student is first generation. Finally, Grutter should be upheld as good precedent. The court in Grutter used the correct test, and the law school passed strict scrutiny because it had a compelling interest in obtaining the educational benefits that flow from a diverse student body. And it is also very tailored because it only used race as a plus factor. There were no determinative points, and it had a good faith consideration of race-neutral alternatives. And because Grutter has been present for such a long time, universities rely on Grutter to foster a more diverse student body. From a public policy perspective, historically, education was only reserved for rich and white men. And And it wasn't until the University of California versus Bakke in 1978 that it was to be used as a plus factor to diversify campuses. However, even then, admissions were still abysmally low because of racism and segregation. Even today, proportions of Black, Latinx, and minority students are still low. However, even after 20 years, is still important now in bringing diversity. Your Honors, I have clearly shown that Grutter should be upheld, and that CMC's race-conscious admissions process is constitutional under the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. Respondent respectfully requests that she affirm Grutter and the lower court decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Would both counsel approach the podium? I think we will likely have questions for both.
And first question for the petitioner today, we've been mentioning for 25 years here, as we know. How do you address some of the public policy concerns around overturning Grutter and how that would inevitably significantly impact racial disparity?
For the question, we can see that there are race-neutral alternatives that do work. Like I said, there is a policy being used at TMC at present that allows students graduating within the top 10% of the class to automatically be admitted. As well as the fact there are also race-neutral alternatives that consider economic disadvantages for students. And we've seen in California where UC Berkeley and UCLA actually implemented these race-neutral alternatives. They found that there was more diversity on their campuses than they've ever seen before. And so colleges should place their hope in these race-neutral alternatives instead of focusing on race-conscious admissions policies that disadvantage students like Asian Americans.
Question for the respondent. How do you respond to the petitioner's argument that because the percentage of applicants by race closely tracks the percentage of admitted students by race, that the consideration of race is in effect a quota and not a plus consideration?
Can you rephrase the question?
Sure. So we heard from the petitioner that the percentage of applicants is very similar to the percentage of admitted students by race, and the petitioner made the argument that that means that the consideration of race is a quota system. How do you respond to that? What's your argument that consideration of race is not a quota system?
The consideration of race is not a quota system because in this case, race is only to the plus factor, and TMC also considers all the pertinent elements of diversity, so they're not just focusing on race, they're also focusing on other factors as seen by the top 10% policy, outreach into underserved areas, and there are other policies.
Thank you. May I reply?
Yes.
The consideration of race at TMC in present is definitely a quota system, as we see the 5 to 10% range of students that tracks what we see in applicant pools for minority students. And that is further also amplified by the argument that we see that there are group racial discussions happening with 46 admissions officers, and the fact that Asian American applicants have been disadvantaged despite their performance in academic measures in order to allow for room for the seats they've set aside for minorities.
Yes. 5 to 10% is actually a lot considering how the percentage of the professional class in other universities. And for the career racial discussions and the admissions officers, it's really unfortunate that that has happened, but because TMC only uses race as a plus factor, TMC makes sure that even if this situation does happen, it won't really affect the applicant's chance of getting into TMC.
Question for the petitioner. Here we have an informal point system. How do you respond to the argument that every student ultimately receives individualized consideration as part of the admissions process by highly skilled admissions officers whose judgment you are asking this court to replace?
In the past, we've seen at Harvard in particular that Harvard claimed that it had used the holistic review process when there were Jewish students on campuses. And there were a majority of Jewish students on campuses, and though they claimed to use this holistic process in order to increase diversity on these campuses, on their campus, they actually were able to, they were able to tailor their policy in order to reduce the number of Jewish students on campus and increase diversity by allowing or allotting seats for other minority students, thus implementing a quota system, and then that allowed for the more minority students to happen to be on campus. So the term holistic doesn't necessarily mean that schools aren't implementing a quota system. And it's not just a quota system we see here, we also see a point system in which 13 points are allotted to a majority of minority students.
Can I respond to that?
Please.
13 points are allotted, but even if a minority gets the maximum or the minimum amount of points, it doesn't automatically determine that they're going to get accepted into TMC. TMC considers many other factors, and even if they do have this specific 13 points in the personal background section, they can also use other factors and other qualifications that they have to be accepted to TMC.
May I respond?
Yes, please give it brief. Thank you.
A majority of the students, as I said before, getting those full 13 points are minority students, showing that these points aren't accessible to all students, and a majority, and that means that some students are being disadvantaged in that process as well, as we see that students like Asian Americans are being disadvantaged in other subjective matters as well.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question for respondent. How do you respond to the argument that TMC is already using race-neutral policies or alternatives that are producing results?
TMC has been on New Jersey for a very long time, and only through a combination of the race-neutral alternative, using race as only a plus factor, and a holistic review have we seen the increase of diversity. And going back to Jessica's point, Asian Americans actually make up more of the minority population. They actually make up 20% of the minority proportion compared to Black, Latinx, and other minorities.
I have a question for the petitioner. Does the Constitution require that universities must be racially blind on admission?
The Constitution does require that all people protected under the rights of the status of being a citizen of America are granted equal protection, which is the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Though the Constitution does not necessarily require that race-blind admissions are at play, it does require that we ensure that all people are afforded the same advantages and that no certain group is disadvantaged merely because another group is supposed to be favored, which is happening at TMC at present with the point system, with the quota system, and with the fact that they can invest in race-neutral alternatives. And we also see that in Qatar as the quota system was passed as constitutional.
I have a question for respondent. There's been some discussion by both counsel about the 25 years that was referenced, that we mentioned in Grutter as how long we expected that decision to last. If your argument is 25 years isn't long enough, how much longer will be enough?
I actually think that since this is a really big issue, I feel like we should maybe try to increase to 25 years to maybe 30 or 35, to maybe 5 or 10 more years. Obviously, this issue is a very important one, and it involves like young people's their education, so we should take this very seriously. So I would recommend 5 more years, adding on to 25 years, or maybe 10 more years.
May I respond? I believe, well, it is true that there are race-neutral alternatives that work, which is why another 25 or 5 to 10 years is unnecessary. When we look at how race-neutral alternatives have worked on campuses like UC Berkeley or UCLA, we see that diversity actually increased with the implementation of race-neutral alternatives. So it's no longer necessary for us to consider race in admissions.
Very briefly.
In California, for medical schools, when race conscious admission process was then actually diversity actually decreased because of that. So I don't think race neutral alternatives will be the immediate solution to having more diversity process.
number of students from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds, which colleges do not want to do because they want to make a profit. That is why they've been using race-conscious admissions policies in order to increase the amount of minority students who come from wealthy backgrounds. Instead of focusing on disadvantaged students, you really need that push and that extra point boost in order to compete against other students.
Very.
Race-conscious admission process actually kind of help minorities in a way, especially when most minorities, sometimes when they write personal essays, they will include their race. And when colleges kind of take that into their admittance of the applicant, they'll kind of push their decision on whether or not to accept them.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
What amazing performances we have seen and heard. Let us give it up for all of our. Very, very impressive. And now you all may exhale. Congratulations, you have just completed your final debate. To get to it, I'd like to make a few announcements. First, I would like to again thank our sponsors and our judges for spending time with us. Making this a real live debate and lively debate. We couldn't have done it without you. Secondly, I'd like to thank all of our mentors and our coaches who are here to support your students. They are incredibly lucky to have you in their corner, and I wish I could have taken pictures of you while they were debating. Just the pride and the joy that I saw on your faces, it just tells it all. So thank you for helping us help them. And to all of our parents and guardians and friends and supporters, thank you all for coming. And I do have to apologize to our parents because I know that the students have been doing your chores at home. They've been up late at night, burning the midnight oil, preparing, and it showed tonight that you all have been spending some time with this debate. I'm super impressed. I'm telling you, you were so poised and just calm and collected, thinking quickly on your feet. And I mean, you are ready. You are already lawyers. I heard a lawyer say, I can't even do this in court now. And that's the truth. So congratulations to you, students. Before I turn it over to David Levine from Bloomberg to announce the winners, please note that as soon as announcements are made, you will be, or as soon as the announcement of the winners is made, you will be dismissed from the courtroom, and we ask that you head directly downstairs to retrieve your phone and exit the building. But before exiting this room, please make sure that you haven't left anything. You know that we leave our places cleaner than we entered it, so just make sure that any trash on the floor or on your chair is gone. And then without further ado, I'd like to ask our esteemed panel of judges to briefly introduce yourselves, ending with David Levine, who's going to make some remarks, say some remarks to our students, and announce our winners.
Hi, my name is Christina Conspire. I am a commercial counsel at Bloomberg.
Hi, I'm Peter Weston. I'm an in-house counsel at Bloomberg. I work on mergers and acquisitions.
I'm Alicia Hornsby, also in-house counsel at Bloomberg. I look after our data privacy and data security.
My name is Tom Goldman, and I'm the general counsel.
Hi, I'm Sarah White, and I am commercial counsel at Bloomberg.
I'm Amy Barron, and he's the lawyer from Bloomberg.
Stephen Haber, in-house litigation and pro bono counsel.
remarks here today. This is always one of my favorite events of the year. We're really privileged and fortunate to have this great association with Legal Outreach, and really just the performances year after year, I think are just amazing. And we're always in awe of them. And, you know, I will remind, or at least our colleagues here tonight, to give very brief introductions. We have some colleagues up here as judges who have argued in this courtroom before, have argued before the Second Circuit. We have a former Assistant United States Attorney and another colleague who's argued many cases before the federal court. So you're arguing in front of, I'm a corporate attorney, so I know very little about litigation, and I would not fare very well in this competition. But you are arguing in front of some very impressive colleagues. And without a doubt, if we did not have an age minimum for hiring at Bloomberg, I would hire you all today. I'm working on trying to revise that policy. Don't think I'm going to get an exception quite yet. So we thank you all for your hard work. It really showed in your presentations today, and the way you very nimbly responded to some very challenging questions. And I know keeping all of the case law and facts in your head is a really difficult thing to do, to stand up there by yourself. All that preparation really paid off. I think the performances were really incredible, and the debates between our lawyers were really dynamic. So, and the last thing I really wanted to say, two things I wanted to say. First is, we need you in this profession, so I hope you really do strongly consider pursuing a career in law. I think you're all really talented and really spirited, and we need fresh ideas, and we need youth, and really encourage all of you to consider, but regardless of what you decide to do, use this experience to propel yourselves forward. You know, take the feedback. You all really performed well. I'm sure there are things you can learn from this experience, things you can learn from each other and observing each other, and hopefully the friendships that you've made here will also last a lifetime. Lastly, before we get to the much awaited results, I wanted to thank the team at Legal Outreach. It's really a privilege for us to do this every year. The relationship that we've developed has really grown from year after year. I think we've been doing this now for 5 or 6 years, and every year I feel like we can get closer, and it's really a privilege and an honor for us. And I want to specifically thank Tamika and James. As some of you know, James, this is the 40th year of Legal Outreach, which is just amazing. And James founded Legal Outreach coming out of law school. And to think about everything that's been achieved in the last 4 decades, and I just want to stop before we announce the winners and have a round of applause for this wonderful organization and the leadership in this organization, which has done just an incredible job. If you look at the track record, all of you are going to accomplish amazing things, but this started 40 years ago to build up to where we are now. And so I'd like to acknowledge Tamika and James and everybody from Legal Outreach who was here for their amazing efforts in this program. Thank you. Okay, so without any further ado, we're gonna, gosh, I hope these are in order. Okay, I'm the worst person to do this. Okay, somebody should be looking over me. All right. And we can, I guess we can applaud for each student as we go through. So in 6th place, Eugenia Bamfo. Congratulations. In 5th place is Wendy Levy. Alexa Amaya. Congratulations. In second place is, or should I do first?
Second.
We'll do second, okay. In second place is Maya Tello. Congratulations.
Perfect.
Great job. Thank you. All the suspense is gone now. So, in first place is Jessica Baba. Congratulations.
Perfect. Thank you. Should we all go up, or how do you want photos? You want the Bloomberg staff?
All of our students tonight have received a voucher.
Wow, I'll be here. Yeah, the front row just because a little sorority spot for us. In this room. Try to get everybody's head in.
Big smiles, everyone. Big smiles.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, now can we get
Thank you. Thank you.